listener production.
Hey, Tara Cassidy with you, and welcome to The Briefing. In 2032, Australia will become the global stage for the top athletes in the world, all competing for Olympic glory. But where there's professional sport, there's always those trying to use it to their advantage.
We've seen the whole range right through to that organised crime where international syndicates have intentionally targeted our sport. People outside the sport, we've seen coaches involved, we've seen obviously athletes.
That chat with the people helping catch the dopers, cheaters and scammers in Australian sport is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Chris Spiru. It's Tuesday the 28th of October.
Hey Tara, and to you listening. Donald Trump once again seems to be flying in the face of the US Constitution, this time saying he'd love to run for a third term as president.
I would love to do it. I have my best numbers ever. It's very terrible. I have my best numbers. Am I not ruling it out? You'll have to tell me.
That's Trump speaking from Air Force One as he flew from the ASEAN summit in Malaysia to Japan after a journo asked him if he'd try to get around the 22nd Amendment, which limits presidents to 2 terms, by running as vice president in 2028. Here's what he had to say to that question.
Yeah, I'd be allowed to do that, but I wouldn't do it. I think it's too cute. Yeah, I would rule that out because it's too cute. I think the people wouldn't like that. It's too cute. It wouldn't be right.
In case you missed it, Tara, it would be too cute.
Now, Trump has floated the idea of sticking around beyond his constitutionally mandated 2 terms a bunch of times before. He's often cracked jokes at rallies, released Trump 2028 hats, and let some of his allies hint that they're looking for legal loopholes to make it happen. But legal experts say it's a non-starter, and when Trump was asked if he'd take the fight to court, he shrugged it off, saying he hasn't really thought about it before shifting gears to praise his team.
Well, we have great people. We have JD, obviously. The vice president is great. I think Marco's great. I think, I'm not sure if anybody would run against us. I think if they ever formed a group, it would be unstoppable.
Yeah, so some interesting, almost succession-like planning going on there. Look, he has since touched down in Tokyo, the second stop on his Asian tour, where he's met with Emperor Naruhito and is scheduled to meet with Japan's newly elected female Prime Minister Sanae Takichi. Then he's off to South Korea for the APEC summit, the same summit Albo will be at, for highly anticipated talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping.
The pre-sentence hearing for 23-year-old Victorian woman Hannah Maguire's killer will resume today after yesterday leaving the courtroom aghast after loved ones learned her boyfriend, Lachlan Young, strangled her, burned her body, then allegedly told a friend, well, she's hot now, isn't she? At the pre-sentence hearing in Ballarat, the Supreme Court heard Young killed Ms Maguire at their home before putting her body in her ute and driving it to bushland, where he set it alight and staged the scene to look like a suicide. Prosecutors allege Ms Maguire had been planning to leave Lachlan Young in the months before her death in April 2024, as he was controlling, verbally abusive, had threatened her, physically attacked her, even once tried to run her off the road.
According to the prosecution, when Hannah finalised her plans to leave, Young demanded she stay, saying, "I can't let you walk away," and telling a friend he was going to scare her to stay by drugging her and crashing her car. Instead, he killed her. Young then deleted security footage from the pair's house and used Hannah's phone to send fake messages to her mother, suggesting she was suicidal. Earlier this year, Young admitted to killing Hannah midway during his trial, with his defence saying the early guilty plea should be taken into account for his sentencing.
And at the pre-sentence hearing yesterday, the court also heard 15 victim impact statements from Hannah's loved ones and friends, with Hannah's father, Glenn, describing her as the light of my life. Hannah's mother, Debbie, says the hurt she carries each day is crippling, and she hopes Young endures the most intense pain imaginable for the rest of his life. The hearing will continue in Ballarat this morning, and just quickly, if this story has raised any issues for you, remember you can call 1-800-RESPECT.
Neo-Nazi leader Thomas Sewell's faced court in Victoria over a white supremacist rally where he marched a group of about 30 black-clad masked men shouting and demanding that non-whites be deported in 2023. The hearing relates to his actions on the 169th anniversary of the Eureka Stockade, where he and the group stopped at the Eureka Stockade Memorial Park and sang Rule Britannia and No More Chinamen in Ballarat. The Ballarat court heard the group also held a sign saying Australia for the white man, as well as chanting The Rest Must Go.
Now, to prove guilt in this case, the prosecution basically has to establish that any reasonable person would find Mr. Sewell's actions and chants offensive. Now, Sewell, who heads the Nationalist Socialist Network, claims they are not, and he's arguing that he has an implied constitutional right to political communication. Now, a video of him giving an anti-immigration speech was played to the court where he described white people as becoming a minority.
Last Friday, he also pushed to have his copy of Hitler's manifesto Mein Kampf returned so he could prepare his defence. Sewell will remain in custody with the case continuing today.
If you had a Facebook account 10 years ago, you've got until the end of the year to claim your potential slice of a $50 million payout. More than 310,000 Aussies can apply after Facebook's owner Meta paid the landmark settlement to our privacy watchdog back in December, stemming from the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
And that's the one where a British data firm in the 2010s harvested info from 87 million Facebook profiles worldwide after they or their friends downloaded its This Is Your Digital Life Personality quiz app. An investigation by the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner at the time found that while just 53 Australian users installed the app, nearly 312,000 had their data exposed because they were friends with those users.
Now, claims opened in June this year but close on December 31. You are eligible if you had a Facebook account between late 2013 and 2015, which I'm guessing is a lot of you, and either used the app or were friends with someone who did. Now, Cambridge did ultimately shut down in 2018 after this scandal, which also revealed it used the information to try and target voters with personalised political advertisements. And then Meta at the time copped a $5 billion US penalty, which is huge. And nowadays, companies and algorithms do it and get away with it anyway for free, and no one bats an eyelid.
And the Bureau of Meteorology, or the BOM, has defended its decision to give its new website a $4 million facelift, despite widespread criticism over its look and also the timing, smack bang in the middle of storm and bushfire season. It launched the site last week when there were severe storms, heat waves and wind warnings across most of the country, i.e. the reason most Aussies might jump on to use the trusty weather app.
Yeah, that's right. And only to get on, like myself, and realise it's bloody difficult to navigate, which yesterday was me trying to find the forecast for multiple states and not having a very good time. It is incredibly hard to find some really basic info. But BOM has since received, not me, but a flood of complaints, including people on social media and even radio jocks joining the pile-on.
A torrential downpour of complaints.
Critics say the design is confusing, making data harder to find and often too simplistic.
It honestly looks like an ancient version of the internet, or like it was made on MS Paint.
Real wordsmiths there. Now, look, I can see why this app and website, rather, is used by a lot of people. 2.6 million Aussies just on that launch day, and it's millions and millions each week, over 2 billion a year, Chris. So I can see why people might think that they need to get it right.
Yeah, I didn't realise the BOM was such an integral part of that many Australian lives. I mean, we're surrounded by it here at work, but I didn't realise it impacted that many people. Look, the BOM says the update was well overdue, and while it will review people's feedback, it hopes people will just get used to it, which is so funny because it's coming from the same organisation that not too long ago was asking us all to call it the Bureau instead of calling it the BOM, which was a weird moment in time.
Yeah, not likely, but what do you think about this new site? Have you tried it out yet? We'll chuck a prompt up in our broadcast channel Behind the Briefing on Instagram. Let us know. But that brings our headlines today to a close. Coming up next is my deep dive, looking at the cheats and crims targeting professional sport in Australia, even our beloved soon-to-be 2032 Olympic Games. Have a listen to that up next.
Here is the almighty Australians.
This is a famous victory, a magnificent performance.
Australia are going to take the gold medal.
The findings are shocking.
Criminal gangs are dealing banned drugs to elite athletes.
3 A-Leagues players have been involved in a sports betting scandal.
If you want to cheat, if you want to fix a match, we will catch you.
9 of the nation's top professional athletes could be facing a 2-year ban after testing positive to a banned substance.
For as long as there's been professional sport, there's been those who use and abuse it. Cheaters, scammers and criminals looking to gain an advantage or way to make big bucks. And as we edge closer to the biggest sporting spectacle in the globe to be hosted right here in Australia in 2032, the need to protect the integrity of our sport is as prominent as ever. Here to discuss this topic today is Chris Butler and James Moller from Sport Integrity Australia, the body helping combat things like doping and competition manipulation in Aussie sport. James, we'll start with you. One of the more common issues we do see in professional sport is competition manipulation and sports wagering. What does that entail and what examples have we seen of it in Australia?
Yeah, look, it's well known as match fixing, and what we've seen in Australia is betting-related match fixing predominantly. There are other ways, obviously sporting competitions can be manipulated, and we do work with sports on that, but if we're looking historically at the betting examples, we've had criminal offences for match fixing since 2012, starting with New South Wales. Victoria followed and others after that. And we have seen examples of match fixing both offshore, where the betting's happened in Australia, or where match fixing's happened in Australian sport. We had a really significant, probably the best example, textbook case in 2013 that Victoria Police investigated with an international organised crime syndicate infiltrating a suburban soccer club with significant amounts wagered in betting markets across the world.
Yeah, and I do recall some more recent cases. Only last month there was a Queensland soccer player that was charged in relation to attempted match fixing. And then back in July, there were 3 A-League players that were charged over an alleged yellow card betting scandal. Was Sport Integrity Australia involved in those cases?
To varying degrees. We're known as the national platform for Australia. So unlike the anti-doping space, which Chris can talk about later, in the match-fixing space, because it's criminal, it is a police matter. So our role is to make sure all the parties are talking. So if there's intelligence coming from overseas, our role is to get it to the right agency. So in one of those examples you mentioned, we did get betting intelligence from overseas and we passed it on to New South Wales Police and they conducted an investigation.
How rife is this kind of issue in Australia and who's usually involved? Is it most commonly players, fans, or are we talking more often than not criminal syndicates, foreign interference level involvement?
We've seen the whole range. So we've seen the relatively simple fixing from, say, a tennis player who's decided to lose a set on purpose so that his friends can profit from it, right through to that organised crime example I gave earlier where international syndicates have intentionally targeted our sport. In terms of who's involved, we've seen corruptors, so people outside the sport. We've seen coaches involved. We've seen, obviously, athletes. And the difficulty is it's often the athletes that suffer the worst consequences and generally don't receive most of the profit. So the profit is through the illegal betting or legitimate betting that's identified, potentially goes overseas, whereas the player is the one who's often on the pitch or on the field, is arrested, is interviewed, and not only faces a criminal conviction, potentially prison time, but also usually receives a lifetime ban from their sport. So he's never able to play their sport professionally again.
Yeah, and I can imagine what comes with that is, reputational damage as well. How do you actually investigate and monitor for these kinds of things?
Suspicious betting is often the trigger, not always. There's other ways it can be detected, but often it's either a suspicious betting report from one of our domestic wagering providers who have obligations to report suspected criminal activity, but we also have established relationships with international organisations that also look to monitor overseas betting markets, and we'll determine the most appropriate law enforcement agency. Sometimes it can be multiple law enforcement agencies, pass on that intelligence, and then they'll undertake the investigation. We've seen a range of techniques used from really serious organised crime where police will use telephone intercepts, listening devices, optical devices, where it might be as simple as interviewing a player, executing a search warrant, seizing their devices and finding evidence of match fixing, and then obviously going through the court process.
If we turn to doping now, Chris, this is your domain. First and foremost, how prevalent is doping in Australian sport?
Fortunately, we think it's not overly prevalent. One of the issues, I guess, is we don't know exactly. It's a covert operation. So we use a range of intelligence products and testing methods to try and uncover those that are trying to deliberately cheat. What we know is that Australians generally have a fair degree of high integrity in the sport, and we're not seeing it as a rife or systemic issue. But it's not to say that there aren't those still seeking to gain an advantage. If we talk about 2025, we're probably looking at about 10 to 15 confirmed cases a year in Australian sport, and not all of those will be deliberate doping. Of course, there's a number of substances that the World Anti-Doping Agency prohibit, and some of those include illicit substances like cocaine or marijuana that athletes might choose not to use to enhance their performance so much. So we see a range of doping, and there's a very small number that actually is determined to be deliberate cheating.
If we're talking deliberate cheating, what is the most common kind of doping that we might see?
The type of substances that we see used are still anabolic sort of steroids, but also a move to peptides and SARMs. SARMs being a substance that is sort of similar to anabolic steroids, but with perceived less side effects and risks to the user. And then EPO, blood boosting sort of agents like that are still popular amongst endurance athletes. But really those steroids are still kind of top of the list for those deliberately cheating.
Are we seeing athletes do this in their off season and then coming back and thinking that they might get off, or are they trying to kind of get around the system hoping they're not going to get tested?
Yeah, there's a whole range of motivating factors why athletes might and when they might do it. Sort of off-season is certainly one of those. Athletes who are injured are obviously highly susceptible to trying to come back quicker, particularly those sports with in a final seasons or multi-million-dollar contracts. That return from injury is a really highly motivating sort of time for athletes. Athletes who are on their last year of their contract and might be looking to impress selectors and coaches for next season. There's a multitude of reasons why athletes might do it, and our sort of testing program and intelligence looks to understand that and target our sort of preventative measures around that kind of intelligence. And it's important to know that it's not just Sport Integrity Australia that has sort of jurisdiction over Australian athletes. Any athlete competing internationally, for example, might be tested at the Olympics by the World Athletics Federation, by World Aquatics. So our elite athletes aren't subject to just testing by us. And so a number have been caught overseas as well. So there aren't really a lot of big names. Australian athletes and the population, we're really lucky that it's a high integrity sort of environment, and we don't have a whole list of high profile players compared to what you might see overseas and some countries that are really struggling with a much more systemic problem.
Chris, I imagine there would be a stronger than usual concern about protecting the integrity of the 2032 Olympics, which are coming up. With athletes preparing for arguably the biggest moment of their careers, have you come across any issues yet?
No, but we're actively planning. I mean, it's scary to think that 2032, it's 7 years away, but there's athletes who are 10 or even 7 years old today that will be competing at those games. Those athletes could be as young as 7 today. So kind of as a parent myself, it's a bit horrifying to think that one of those athletes might feel pressured by a parent or a coach or a bad actor to take something dangerous in the pursuit of winning at those games. So we're actively sort of looking at what the threats might be, how we might prevent that, and how we work with athletes and how we educate them, particularly those young ones, about wanting to win. We all want to see our team win, but we want them to see them win well with integrity. So we're using the next 7 years to look at what innovative ways we can take in that prevention space as well as the detection space.
What about you, James? Have you seen any threats to the Olympics yet?
Not specific threats, but we actually announced and launched last week a major sporting event task force. So we hosted a meeting in Melbourne where we brought together law enforcement from across the country, relevant government departments like AUSTRAC, the Financial Intelligence Unit, our Border Force, our sporting bodies and wagering operators, with a focus on major events, not just Olympic and Paralympic Games in 2032, but we've got a pathway of major events over the next 7 years. We've got the Women's Asian Cup early next year. We've got Rugby League and Rugby Union World Cups, Cricket World Cups, and multiple really significant tournaments. And tournaments, they're different in that they can be difficult to investigate. You have a short period of time where athletes are potentially here. And so for police, sometimes their processes do take time for search warrants and similar types of things. We don't want match fixing to happen and then be investigating and prosecuting. We want to stop it. We've got athletes coming from countries where match fixing is not criminal, so they may have different views about what levels of acceptability They have, and we want to be really clear to these athletes and the support staff when they arrive that it's a criminal offence here, but also we have really active police forces who do take it seriously. Our wagering operators monitor their betting markets. Our sporting bodies take it seriously, so that essentially these tournaments right up to 2032 are clean and fair and that we don't have any integrity issues.
And you mentioned before that there is a bit of an issue when it comes to a difference in views in some countries around integrity in sport. And I think back to the Tokyo Olympics, I know that there was some Australian swimmers that were frustrated with an outcome relating to alleged doping of some Chinese swimmers, and their reasoning was later accepted. How do you deal with different rules in each country and levels of acceptance towards these kinds of things?
I think in the doping sense, Tara, that the first answer is that the rules are or should be the same across the world. There is a world anti-doping code, and to compete in the Olympics, for example, every country has to adhere and sign up to that. So athletes are subject to the same rules. How well that's enforced internationally is absolutely an issue and something we're conscious of, because athletes, Australians and worldwide, have to have trust in that system that it's protecting them. If they don't have trust, then we're failing them there. So Australia is really active on that world and global stage. Our ministers represented at the highest levels of the World Anti-Doping Agency. I think it would be fair to say that different countries have a different level of investment. We're very lucky here in Australia that our investment and interest in this area is high, but other countries aren't the same, and it's our job to try and continue to uplift that global capability.
Chris James, really great insight. Hopefully we don't see any of these issues as we're heading up to 2032, but thanks very much for joining me on the briefing today.
Thank you.
Promise. Thanks for having us, Tara.
That was Sport Integrity Australia's Chris Butler and James Moller speaking with me there. And that's it for this episode of The Briefing. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.